What is up, mates of YouTube? Aussie Marcel here, and before we get into the complete fragrance iceberg, I've got a very special announcement to make, and that is that Dossier have sponsored this part of the video. They very generously got in touch with me and asked me to pick out a couple of fragrances and they'll ship them to my door. And so I did. I looked at their extensive catalog of fragrances. They've got both men's, women's, and unisex fragrances. And after, a good half an hour of looking at their fragrances, they've got that many on their website, I opted for 2 fragrances that were inspired by some of Tom Ford's scents. Now, we all know I'm a connoisseur of Tom Ford fragrances, and here's the packaging. It's very well packed. I've got to say, it's actually incredibly well protected here. We've got some dense paper here, cardboard boxes, and the fragrances themselves are inside cardboard boxes as well. So I'll just show you what I selected from their site. In this box, we have Ambery Cherry, and this has been inspired by the fragrance of Lost Cherry. And we've got this one right here, which was inspired by Oud Wood. This is Dossier's take on it, Oud Fougere. 2 fragrances here. I'm just going to give you a little tester. Ambery Cherry has a fragrance oil concentration of 18%. Top notes of cherry, almond, and cinnamon. Middle notes of cloves, rose, jasmine, and plum. Base notes of Peru balsam, tonka bean, and vanilla. And I've tried this fragrance previously and the performance is incredible. 12 hours of performance. It's a beautiful unisex scent here. You get that, you have this beautiful cherry note up top, and it reminds me a little bit of Jupe Homme if it were like a super high class, high quality fragrance. I wore this to work at the bar and I got so many compliments for it. It's actually ridiculous. Every time I go to the bar wearing one of these fragrances, I've gotten compliments for it. So let me just tell you, the public love these scents. And I've got to say, I do too. Ambery Cherry in particular, this has been a game changer. It's a unisex fragrance. It smells incredible. It performs incredibly. And it's at a really good price as well. So definitely check this out on the website. If you want a fragrance that's inspired by Lost Cherry by Tom Ford, this has got you covered. Now, Oud Fougere. This is a fragrance inspired by Oud Wood by Tom Ford. So this one's going to be a little more darker, a little more dense. It is also a unisex fragrance, but it does lean to my nose a little more masculine on the hand. It's got this really rich spice to it. Deep, dark, sensuous woody notes in it. I want to say I prefer Dossier's Ambery Cherry, but the Fougere Oud is incredible. I can't pick between the two, so what I would suggest you guys do, go onto Dossier's website, pick out some fragrances. They've got some really good deals right now as well, and buy some incredible scents. These are all well priced, and the performance and the quality is exceptional for what you're paying. Definitely check them out. And now, let's get into the full fragrance iceberg. What is up, my spooky mates of YouTube? My name is Aussie Marcel, and in today's video, this is a very special one. This is Aussie Marcel's fragrance iceberg. I've been meaning to do a fragrance iceberg video for so long now. Ever since I first saw Wendigoon's disturbing movie Iceberg, I've been in love with this sort of format, and I'm really excited to share this one with you guys. I've been working on this one for days. It's not very often I put this much effort into a video. I've got sheets and sheets of paper here that I've been working on. I'll show you the iceberg that I drew by hand. It's more of like a pyramid type of scheme thing. But yeah, I've been working on this one. I've been putting in the effort, I've been putting in the miles, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So if this sounds good to you, let's get into the video. Now, if you've never heard of an iceberg before, what it is essentially, it's a bunch of layers or levels if you prefer. Up the top is really easy to get into stuff, and down the bottom is the more obscure, esoteric stuff. You can do anything. You can make an iceberg about anything, and I have chosen to do my very own fragrance iceberg, starting with the very obvious and mass appealing stuff up the top, and then at the very bottom, we're getting into some dark, dark stuff. This is going to be a long video, but you will learn some stuff about some fragrances you probably haven't heard of, especially down towards the lower tiers. We're going to get really dark with this one, guys. So without any more preamble, let's get into the fragrance iceberg. Starting at tier 1, the tip of the iceberg, we've got Nautica Voyage from 2006. Nautica Voyage is a very easy to love, mass appealing, floral, fresh, fruity sweet fragrance that is beloved by both teenagers and adults alike. You're not going to meet too many people that dislike the way Nautica Voyage smells. It's very obvious, it's such a safe pick, and that's because it's a beloved scent. You can smell this one out in the wild all the time, people love to wear it, it's very sweet, it's very recognizable as well, and if you're after, you know, a very fresh, fruity, floral, sweet fragrance for the summertime, Nautica Voyage is hard to beat. Plus, it's quite affordable as well. You can pick it up for well under 25 bucks Australian, and that is why it's on the first tier of the iceberg. Next up, we've got CK1 from 1994. This is another beloved fragrance. It's on this list and it's at tier 1 just purely because it allowed so many people in the 90s to get into fragrances. Calvin Klein have said that what they wanted to do was combine the feminine florals with the masculine musks and merge them together to create a fragrance, a unisex fragrance for all. They did such a good job with CK1. I like CK1 so much, and it's so affordable that I use it as a room spray sometimes to freshen up the room. You can get 200 ml for about $35 Australian. It's incredible value. There's not many people that dislike the way this one smells. It's a little basic, it's a little generic, especially nowadays. The same can be said for pretty much anything on tier 1, but that's because this is the mass appealing stuff. These are the most beloved fragrances. It's often been said that if you went into a mall in America in the 1990s, you would be guaranteed to smell CK1, and so for that reason it is in tier 1 of the list. Next up is Dior Sauvage from 2015. Dior Sauvage is another obvious pick simply because it's so prevalent out in the wild. You can smell this one. If you're out in Melbourne, you will smell Dior Sauvage. It's a very expensive fragrance at over $120 for a bottle, but it is very popular and the performance is incredible as well. Nowadays it's a little overplayed in a way that, you know, only one other fragrance on this tier can match, but it is a beloved scent for a reason. If you're out in the wild and you want good compliments, you're going to be wearing Dior Sauvage. It's such an obvious, easy pick. I personally am not the biggest fan of it. I much prefer Sauvage Elixir or Sauvage the Eau de Parfum simply because there's a bit more to them. But if you're after an aromatic, sort of warm, lavender forward fragrance that has massive performance and will get you massive compliments, Dior Sauvage is going to be the fragrance for you. Next, from 2008, is Versace Pour Homme. If you're after a fresh, fruity, floral fragrance with a masculine rose note, look no further than Versace Pour Homme. Of all the fragrances at tier 1, this is probably the easiest to wear. I really doubt there's a person on earth that will truly dislike the way this one smells. It's so easy to love, it's so easy to wear. And another thing that this fragrance shares in common with everything else on tier 1 is the versatility. Every fragrance on tier 1 you can wear in almost every situation. Versace Pour Homme is no different. It's fresh enough to be worn in the summertime, but it's got enough to it. It's got enough body and complexity and depth to be worn in the wintertime as well. And if you're after a bit of a cheat code, wear a fresh summery fragrance in wintertime. I can guarantee you will stand out and you will get compliments for it. But yeah, Versace Pour Homme, it's an obvious pick and that's why it's at tier 1. And finally, rounding out tier 1, we have Paco Rabanne's 1 Million from 2008. This is a very obvious pick. If you're here in Australia, you will smell this one out and about all the time. It is the most popular fragrance that I know of, at least in my area and from my experience. I'm always smelling Paco Rabanne's 1 Million out in the wild. It has that gaudy gold bar. You've probably seen it a million times now. The thing with Paco Rabanne's 1 Million is the performance is incredible. 2 sprays is going to get you well over 12 hours of performance. It is a beast when it comes to performance. I just think it's so overplayed and people put so many sprays of it on here in Australia that it's just, I'm sick of smelling it, more so than anything else on this list. You know, put this at a tier 8 for me, just simply because I wouldn't wear it. But honestly though, people love the way this one smells, and if you're after something that's sweet, that's going to get you compliments, and it's, you know, versatile enough to be worn in the warmer weather. I wouldn't be wearing it on a stinking hot summer day, but it's awesome for winter, it's awesome for autumn. And yeah, if you're after a, a good value, $110 plus fragrance, then 1 million is going to be the fragrance for you. It's not my favorite fragrance, but I'm including it at tier 1 simply because it is so popular here in Australia and you're going to be smelling this everywhere. Now we are on to tier 2, open waters. We're off the iceberg's tip and now into the open waters. The fragrances on tier 2 are also very wearable and are also very mass appealing. They're just a little less common than the fragrances on tier 1, and that's pretty much the main difference between the two. They're of a similar level of likability, it's just that they're a little less common, and we're sort of getting into that territory now where the ingredients are going to be a little different. They're not going to be quite as fresh, not going to be quite as floral or fruity, they're not going to be juvenile, they're going to be a little different. Starting things off, we've got Paco Rabanne's Black Excess from 2005, or the reformulation from 2018. Black Excess was the fragrance that really got me into the fragrance world. This is the original lighter bottle from 2005. In fact, I bought a bottle in high school and I still have that bottle to this day. Black Excess is well known for the strawberry note up top and the patchouli note in the base of the fragrance. It's sweet up top and a little darker, a little more devious down the bottom, if you will. I love it. It's one of the ultimate clubbing fragrances, one of the ultimate going out fragrances. It's been replaced by Paco Rabanne's 1 Million and Paco Rabanne's Invictus, but back in the day, back when I was in high school, you would put on about 10 sprays and then go out to a nightclub. It was the thing to do back when I was a kid. I'm not recommending putting on 10 sprays of anything, honestly, but Black Excess is sweet enough to be mass appealing, but it's with that patchouli note in the base. It does have something a little different, something a little left of field. I personally wear it and get massive compliments for it. You should try it sometime. It's a great alternative, and I think it's a better smelling fragrance than Paco Rabanne's 1 Million, and that's why it's at the top of tier 2. Next up is a classic fragrance from 1989, Yo Pom. This and another fragrance we'll be talking about a little later, quite soon actually. These fragrances in particular were known to be clubbing powerhouses in the very late 80s, at the tail end of the 80s and the early 90s. Yo Pom, you can read reports about it, that it was smelt everywhere across the nightclubs in Europe and in the United States and even here in Australia. Yo Pom has a fragrance community here in Australia. There are a certain group of people that love the way this one smells and have never deviated from it. Personally, I think it smells fantastic. You've got the vanilla, you've got the cinnamon, and that sort of medicinal cherry cough syrup quality to it. I can understand why some people are personally disgusted by the fragrance. It is very overpowering. You only need one spray of it, and it lasts over 24 hours on your skin. To some people, this is a tier 8 fragrance. This is going to be something that is abhorrent. It is obscene to the senses, it is that strong. But to another type of person, this is a cheeky, sweet, and playful clubbing scent. Whether you love it or loathe it, this fragrance isn't too dark. There's enough here to be mass appealing and likable, and that's why I've put it at tier 2. Next up is another fragrance from the 1980s, Drakkar Noir from 1982. This fragrance for me is very special. It was one of the very first fragrances I ever smelt. My dad used to wear this one when we'd go out for dinner, and ever since then, it's been a beloved fragrance for me. I love the way Drakkar Noir smells. Drakkar Noir has that old school barbershop quality to it. You used to smell fragrances like that, well, at least when I was a kid, you used to smell them everywhere. Nowadays, that sort of style of scent, that sort of aromatic, lavender forwards, old school quality, it's not the most popular fragrance nowadays, but it's undeniably masculine, and occasionally you'll still smell Drakkar Noir out in the wild. I often wear Drakkar Noir just simply because of how wearable and versatile it is. I would personally almost put this at a tier 1, but because of the old school quality for it and the nostalgia, I'm putting it at tier 2. I love the way Drakkar Noir smells, and it's very popular elsewhere in the world, especially with older gentlemen in particular, but you will meet some people that don't like the way it smells, and for that reason I put it at tier 2. And finally, from 1990, we've got Calvin Klein's Eternity, the Eau de Toilette. If you're after a unique smelling green fragrance, try Calvin Klein's Eternity. To me, this almost doesn't smell very manly. It's kind of like a unisex fragrance. If you're after something unique, green, and herbal, and a little aromatic as well, try Calvin Klein's Eternity for men. This is a beautiful fragrance, and I think it smells so unique and so different that it almost could have come from 2023, it could have come from last year, it could have come from very recently. It doesn't smell old school to my nose, and it also gets quite a few compliments as well. As far as like an entry-level introduction to a more unique style of fragrances, this is a great intro to that. I personally think it's got enough mass appealing qualities that it warrants being on tier 2, but you personally might put this a little lower at tier 3 simply because it doesn't smell like the most mass appealing fragrance. It doesn't smell like everything else on the market that's popular. I love the way this one smells, and it deserves its spot at tier 2. There is a definite mainstream quality to CK's Eternity. There's enough here in CK Eternity to warrant it being in the tier 2 rather than the tier 1. But I'd be curious to know where you would put CK Eternity in your tier. It's not the most obvious fragrance for compliments and wearability, but there's just something about that aromatic, herbal, green quality to it. I love the way this one smells, and that's why I put it at tier 2. We're at tier 3 now, in the deeper waters. These fragrances, we're starting to go into different sort of styles, different sort of notes that aren't going to be prevalent in the first 2 tiers. So let's get right into it. From 2017, Mercedes-Benz Club Black. 3 words: vanilla, incense, sexy. This is an infinitely wearable, sexy introduction to an incense note when it comes to perfumery. I love the way this one smells, and somebody told me a long time ago that it smells like a masculine cupcake, and ever since then it's just stuck into my brain, that sort of description for Club Black. I love the way it smells. With 1 to 2 sprays you're going to get over 12 hours of performance. It's ideal for the colder weather, but you can still wear it in the springtime and the fall as well, or autumn if you're here in Australia. I love the way it smells. It's affordable at under $40 Australian. It used to be more expensive than that at like $80, but it's come down in price significantly. It's actually basically half price at Chemist Warehouse now. They must have a huge amount of the stock, at least where I live, because you can get this for only 40 bucks. I love the way Club Black smells. It gets me a massive amount of compliments. It's at tier 3 simply because you've got that incense smoky note, and not everybody's going to find it appealing. It's also got a prominent amber note as well, and we're going to be getting into those sort of ingredients now where people are going to be off-put by a certain ingredient or a style of the fragrance, but there's still enough here that it's still going to be appealing to a lot of people. Next up, from 1981, we've got Yves Saint Laurent's Kouros. This fragrance is that perfect convergence between clean and dirty. Some people refer to it as a barnyard scent. It's got that sort of pissy, barnyardy quality to it because of the musks and the animalic notes in it. I think this one smells fantastic. A lot of people give me compliments for it, but I have worn it a couple of times and people have gone, "What are you wearing? I don't like the way that one smells," and I completely understand why, because it has that something in the background that just makes it dirty and animalic. Kouros is a solid introduction to the more animalic world of fragrances. Kouros is a very masculine smelling fragrance. It is ultra masculine, and a lot of those animalic qualities of Kouros are actually softened by some of the honey and floral notes in the scent. It does come across more soft than dark or dirty, but it still has that backbone that makes people go, "What are you wearing? I don't know if I like it or love it." So for that reason, it's at tier 3. You may put it at a tier 1, for example. You may get nothing but positive attention for it, but my experience has been that it does have that barnyard quality to it that makes some people dislike the way it smells, but to each their own. Next up, from 2011, is one of my favorite scents of all time, Dior Homme Intense. This is at tier 3, but it could very easily be a tier 2 fragrance. It is powdery, it has some leathery qualities to it as well, and it's got that really prominent iris note. It's great for the evening time in winter. It's not the most versatile fragrance, like you'd be hard pressed to wear this in the summertime because you will stink out a room quite easily. But yeah, once I've opened it, I can't stop smelling it. It smells fantastic. It's a beautiful smelling fragrance. The performance is incredible. The price is going to be off-putting for a lot of people, and that's partly the reason why I put this at tier 3. It's well over $200 Australian, but what you do get is a niche quality fragrance. This fragrance, despite being a designer brand, It is almost unlike anything else on the market, except maybe Prada L'Homme or something by Valentino, like one of the Valentino Uomo fragrances. This is an exceptional scent. Dior Homme Intense is popular in the mainstream, and it is in the mainstream. Having said that though, there are a certain amount of people that will dislike the way this one smells, simply because it's almost got like a bug spray quality to it. It isn't the darkest fragrance, it isn't the most difficult to wear scent, and it does have many people that love this one, as Dior Homme Intense doesn't have the qualities, those really likable notes and accords that tier 1 and tier 2 fragrances have. That's why I've included it at tier 3. Realistically, it may go bump up a little higher at a tier 2. There's going to be a lot of people that love the way this one smells, but it's always going to have a certain subset of people that just dislike the way it smells. They're not going to vibe with how powdery it is. They're not going to like the kind of earthy, leathery quality to it either. I get nothing but compliments for it, but you will meet people that dislike the way this one smells. It is a good intro to a darker, more refined sort of style of fragrance, and that's why I've put it at tier 3. Next up is the big brother of Eternity Eau de Parfum. This fragrance reminds me of another fragrance that will be on the list a little later. It is more deep, more aromatic, more herbal, and almost more medicinal and earthy than Eternity the EDT. If you're after a safer pick, go with the EDT, but if you're after something that is going to turn more heads with how unique it is, definitely check out the Eau de Parfum. It is a much darker fragrance. It still has that Eternity backbone though. It's still going to have people giving you compliments for it. And I tried this out on some of my younger cousins and they like the way it smells. So it's got enough to it. It's got enough mass appealing qualities to it that it's even going to appeal to teenagers and young adults. But it does veer into that territory where you're experimenting with different styles of notes and accords here. The fragrance is undoubtedly darker. It is sort of where the Eternity EDT was a bright, humid day in a forest. This is a damp night in the forest. It's just earthier and darker, and it's a less safe choice than the Eternity EDT, but it still has enough of a likability to it that people will compliment you for it. And that's why I've put it at tier 3. And finally, rounding out tier 3, we have Nuit d'Issy by Issey Miyake 2014. And once Eternity the EDP dries down, it does remind me of Nuit d'Issy. Nuit d'Issy has enough of a vanilla note that's still going to give you a lot of compliments. It is darker and smokier than, say, Mercedes-Benz Club Black. I've always found the note of vanilla to be great for compliments, and that's why I couldn't justify putting this a little lower on the list. There is one fragrance that is similar to this that is on the tier 4, we'll get to that in a second, but Issey Miyake's Nuit d'Issy from 2014 is a beautiful fragrance. Nuit d'Issy from 2014 has a vanilla note, it's got a lot of incense to it as well, and it's got an amberish quality to it. Think of it sort of like Mercedes-Benz Club Black, but it's more of a leather jacket, black tie sort of style of fragrance rather than the more playful Mercedes-Benz Club Black. It's a little more mature, it's a little more refined. Nuit d'Issy gets me a lot of compliments, but it can be a little strong, it can be a little overwhelming and challenging for some people, so that's why I put it at tier 3. But it's the vanilla note and that sort of refined smokiness. For those reasons, I'm including it at a tier 3 rather than a tier 4. Now we're getting into the really good stuff with tier 4. This is the sort of level of the iceberg. Well, between level 3, 4 and 5 is really where I like to gravitate towards when it comes to these fragrances. And we're starting off this list with one of my personal favorites of all time, Zadig and Voltaire's This Is Him from 2016. This is like Nuit d'Issy and Club Black on steroids. It is vanilla, it is smoky, it's just much more rock and roll than both of those fragrances. That incense note is so strong in it that it's going to be off-putting to some people, but it's still going to get you some compliments. As it sort of matches my style, I get a lot of compliments for it, but you sort of, at this sort of tier and level of the iceberg, you sort of have to match your fragrances to your outfit. Previously, you can sort of wear anything with anything and it's going to work, but with tier 4, a lot of these fragrances are going to appeal to a certain style, and you've got to sort of wear a certain style of clothing for them. Zadig and Voltaire's This Is Him is sort of no different to that. If you love your rock and roll, your heavy metal, your punk rock, things like that, but you still want to smell fantastic, gravitate towards something like Zadig & Voltaire's This Is Him. It's going to get you massive compliments, and it's not the most expensive scent either. You can pick up bottles of it for well under $80. It's got a tiny bit of patchouli in it, but if you're after a more patchouli dominant version of This Is Him, try Just Rock by Zadig & Voltaire. That replaces some of the incense with more patchouli. It's just a different sort of style of the same fragrance. If you're after more patchouli, go with Just Rock. If you want more vanilla and smoke, go with This Is Him. Next up, as I alluded to before when I was talking about Yo Pom, Dior Fahrenheit from 1988. This was previously a clubbing powerhouse. One spray of this is going to last you all night. It smells like gasoline in the opening, and that's why it's at tier 4 with that gasoline opening. But once you sort of live with the fragrance a little bit, you discover that it's got a lot of violet to it. It's very floral and leathery as well, but it's the gasoline or petrol opening that is off-putting to some people. It is ultimately masculine until you reach a certain point of experience with the scent, and then it kind of comes across as unisex just because of how floral, how secretly floral this fragrance is. It is one of the most beast mode fragrances of all time, and I would wear this over Dior Sauvage any day of the week. This is simply a masterpiece. Some people might put this at a tier 5. They might think it's different and wild enough to be at the tier 5, lower still, but I think it's got enough of a mass appealing quality to it that it warrants being at tier 4. I love the way this one smells, but it is a controversial pick for some people. You will meet people that dislike the way this one smells, inevitably, undoubtedly, because of that gasoline, that petrol opening. If you want that, check out Dior's Fahrenheit. It's on the pricier side. It's at a similar price to Dior's Sauvage at about $130. I think it smells fantastic. It is one of the best performing fragrances. It's one of my favorites, and it is on tier 4. Next up from 2006, we have Lalique's Encre Noir. If you've unfortunately experienced bushfires before, you will know what this one smells like. To my nose, this smells like gum trees on fire. It's got that smoky incense quality, but it also has like a eucalypt burning smell. It's very aromatic, green. It's almost piney and coniferous. It's beautiful. It's such a dark fragrance. You will meet people that dislike the way this one smells on you, but you will also meet people that love the way this one smells. Personally, I think it's got a good balance between likability and uniqueness. It's such a beautiful, daring fragrance. It's dark in such a positive way. If you want a fragrance that smells like a bushfire, that smells like burning and pine, then definitely check out Encre Noir. It's fantastic. You can pick up bottles of this in Australia for under $50 at Chemist Warehouse, but they do tend to sell quickly because fans of niche fragrances and good quality designer scents will be picking this one up. Next up from 2015, we've got John Varvatos' Dark Rebel, and I'm sharing this spot with John Varvatos' Dark Rebel Rider from 2016. If you're after a more smoky scent, then check out Dark Rebel. If you're after a more leathery, ambery scent, check out Dark Rebel Rider. These two fragrances are beautiful, but they do have their detractors. Dark Rebel is more of your bad boy, your suave bad boy, and Dark Rebel Rider is more for your sort of bike riding bad boy. They're both fantastic fragrances for compliments, but you will meet people that think they're off-putting. They don't have a lot of the likable qualities that the tier 1 and the tier 2 scents have. These are dark fragrances, don't get me wrong. Both of these fragrances are great choices if you want something dark that's still going to get you compliments. Rumor has it they are discontinued, so you will be paying a pretty penny for them on eBay and at online discounters, but you never know, sometimes you might get lucky like I did and get a bottle of Dark Rebel Rider for $40 Australian brand new. Check them out if they sound appealing to you. They are dark, but they aren't so dark that they will be off-putting to everyone. Next up from 2015, we have Boss Bottled Oud, and this is probably the darkest Boss Bottled fragrance, and it is the first Oud fragrance on the list. If you're after a easy to like, oud-based fragrance, even though it's a synthetic sort of oud, check out Boss Bottled Oud. The note of oud, when used in certain ways, can come across very fecal and dirty and grimy and animalic, but when it's synthetic and used like Hugo Boss have done with Boss Bottled Oud, it comes across as very luxurious and rich, And for that reason, I'm putting it at a tier 4. Some people may even put it at a tier 3 just because it's one of the more wearable and likable fragrances on this tier 4. But the note of oud, you're going to meet people that dislike the way it smells, and Boss Bottled Oud is no different. It has that luxurious woodiness, it has the spicy quality, and it has that synthetic, luxurious, decadent oud note, but it is synthetic. Anyways, I think it smells fantastic. It can be on the pricey side, but I have seen bottles at about $100 Australian. If that sounds good to you, check it out. But I'm putting it at tier 4 because it's at that middle ground between likability and being dark and different and unique. And finally, to round out tier 4, we have from 1993, Sergei Lutin's Ombre Sultan. This fragrance has an amber note that is so decadent and luxurious and lavish that it comes across almost as animalic, and there are people that will dislike how dense and powerful this one is. This fragrance lasts for 48 hours plus with 2 sprays, even though it's been reformulated. It is a very old school sort of animalic scent in how the amber is presented. It can come across as animalic and musky depending on your bottle that you get. My sample of Ombre Sultan sort of reminds me of Mercedes-Benz Club Black turned up to like 20 on the scale. It is very, very dense and heavy and hangs around and it stays in the room, and it just comes across as very almost resinous in a way, but it does smell very lavish and luxurious and very wealthy at the same time. It's an expensive scent, but you do get what you pay for with that, and that's why I'm including it at tier 4. Some people may put it a little lower. That animalic quality may make people want to put it at a tier 5, but I think it's very luxurious smelling and it will get you a lot of compliments. So with that said, we have finished tier 4 and we're getting into the really good stuff now. The stuff that is going to be off-putting to a lot of people. We are on the tier 5 of the iceberg. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty now. This is where things start becoming way less people-pleasing. These are where we're entering the more niche style fragrances. These fragrances themselves are going to appeal to a niche, and that's about it. These fragrances on tier 5 are still going to get you compliments. It's just that the scope of people that are going to appreciate these scents are more narrow, and no fragrance epitomizes that more than the first fragrance on tier 5. Chanel Antaeus from 1981. This is a powerfully leathery, mossy, smoky fragrance, and it's notable for the castoreum note, which used to be sourced from animals and now it's synthetic. It is a very love it or hate it fragrance. It is incredibly masculine, very old school as well. If you haven't smelled Antaeus before, try and imagine maybe YSL's Kouros, except more mossy and more animalic, and you've got a rough idea of sort of where Antaeus sort of is. The thing about Antaeus in particular is that it still has a lot of people that love the way this one smells. It still will get you compliments, but just like I said earlier, the scope is more narrow. There aren't going to be many people that come up to you and go, wow, what are you wearing? It smells incredible. We're in that territory now where these are starting to become more fragrances you wear for yourself than for other people. Antaeus is a little different in that you still will get compliments for this one, much the same as you would a YSL Kouros. It's just a more extreme version of that style of fragrance. Anyway, Antaeus is an expensive fragrance. You're going to be paying well over $250 for it. It has a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there that love the way it smells, but there are also a lot of people out there that just can't stand the way it smells because of the animalic and that dark quality to it. Which brings me to the next fragrance on tier 5 from 2002, Comme des Garçons Incense Avignon. This fragrance smells like a church on fire, a Catholic church on fire. It is very smoky. The incense note here is super realistic, super dense, but it has like a freshness to it as well in that opening. It's almost like a green sort of style of freshness. Earthy, green, almost mossy in a way. It's a beautiful smelling fragrance. Similar to Lalique Encre Noir, it's just a more extreme sort of version of it. Very similar, but different still. This fragrance isn't going to be beloved. There are going to be people that do not like the way this one smells. It's going to be too dark, too smoky, too almost medicinal for some people. This is the definition of a fragrance that you wear for yourself and not for other people. Unlike fragrances lower on the list, you will still get compliments for this one, but it's just, like I said, the scope has been narrowed significantly. It is a pricey fragrance as well over $100. It's very difficult to find. If you can get it for $100, definitely pick it up. It's one of those fragrances that I go months without seeing, and then I'll see a couple of bottles for $100, and then I'll go months without seeing, and then I'll see them for $300. It's hit or miss. All of the incense line by Comme des Garçons is very hit and miss when it comes to availability. For the pricing, for the availability, for the, you know, the uniqueness of the scent, it's at a tier 5. It's much less safe to wear than a Zadig & Voltaire This Is Him, or an Encre Noir, for example. But there are going to be people that still like the way this one smells. But with that being said, let's move on to the next fragrance. Next on the list is my personal favorite All Saints fragrance from 2018, Incense City. This starts off very similar to Incense Avignon by Comme des Garçons. It's a similar scent to that. It is dark, it is smoky, it's a little green in the opening, a little balsamic in it. It's got that kind of balsamic vinegar quality almost. Kind of woody, kind of dry as it dries down. And I don't know why I'm smelling Incense Avignon, but Incense City, it has a lot of qualities to it that are still going to appeal to some people, but that dense, smoky quality to it as well is going to be off-putting. It's definitely in the vein of those sort of dark, smoky, rock and roll style fragrances. It's a little churchy in the opening. You've got a lot of that green, almost floral quality to it, that mossiness, and then as it dries down, you get an expanded incense note and an expanded smokiness. It isn't going to be for everybody. I love the way it smells. It is an incredible smelling fragrance to my tastes, but it is not going to be for everyone. And I've had much more luck getting compliments for Zadig & Voltaire's This Is Him, for example, and Nuit d'Issy. We're in that territory now when the incense fragrances, where that smokiness is very dense and it can be a little harsh to some people. I think that both Incense Avignon and Incense City, for example, have a much more nuanced, much more refined smokiness, but it's still going to be a little too dark for most tastes. It's a beautiful smelling fragrance. I love it. I love both of these scents, and that is why it is at a tier 5. It's also hard to find, and when you can find it, it is expensive. So that is another reason why it's at tier 5. Next up from 2017, we have Gucci Guilty Absolute. How many people out there have bought this Gucci fragrance without smelling it first, thinking that they're going to get amazing compliments for it, and what they do get is a densely decaying leather quality fragrance with Band-Aid. That's what it smells like. It is decaying leather and medicinal, almost iodine, antiseptic Band-Aid. The reason why I've put Gucci Guilty Absolute on tier 5 is because I've met very few people that actually like the way this one smells. That leather note is so realistic, and it so much smells of old, decaying, damp leather. And I've got to spray this on my hand. I just have to. A dab will do ya. So sharp. You've got that almost earthy quality. Damp, decaying leather, Band-Aids, antiseptic. It's a niche quality fragrance with a designer label. It's my personal favorite Gucci scent, even though I wear Gucci Guilty Black almost every day. This fragrance is undoubtedly a masterpiece when it comes to designer fragrances. But it is not for everybody. This is going to be off-putting to a lot of people. I was working in a clothing store one day, and I had somebody follow me up the ramp in the clothing store, and they said to me, I don't know what you're wearing, and I can't tell if I love it or hate it, but I can't stop smelling it. And that is Gucci Guilty Absolute in a nutshell. If you want something that is going to turn heads, but not always in a good way, check out Gucci Guilty Absolute. Do not get this if you're just looking for a compliment beast Gucci fragrance. It is nothing like that at all. And finally, from 2007, rounding out the tier 5 list, we have Narciso Rodriguez For Him. This isn't quite as dark as, say, Incense Avignon or Gucci Guilty Absolute, but what it is that it has a deeply musky quality to it. It's very hard to explain. It's sort of like rain on a concrete. It is the definition of an almost gothic smelling fragrance, if you can sort of imagine that. I suppose Incense Avignon would also be a gothic smelling fragrance. But Narciso Rodriguez, for him, it has that deeply musky quality to it. It's aromatic, it's very musky, it's got a kind of damp, wet smell to it, and it also has this aromatic, earthy quality as well. It's definitely not for everybody. There will be some people that like the way it smells, but for the most part, it is going to be something that you're going to wear for yourself. It has often been described as a cozy fragrance. Maybe if you're in a log cabin and it's raining outside and you're comfortable in front of a fire and you're smelling like Narciso Rodriguez for him, in that situation, I think it would be quite an attractive fragrance. But out and about, if you were smelling a bunch of people at a club with this fragrance, it'd be a little weird, it'd be out of place. This is a fragrance for a time and a place, more so than a lot of other fragrances, and for that reason I've put it at a tier 5. But of everything at tier 5, it is the most gentle, it is the softest at tier 5. But where we're going now, there is no turning back. We're entering the tier 6. This is where things are getting... These fragrances are going to be actively disliked. And honestly, I probably could have put Gucci Guilty Absolute at the tier 6. People dislike the way this one smells. It is not a popular fragrance with anybody but, you know, the fragrance lords like myself. Not that I think of myself as a fragrance lord, but you know what I mean. Those guys that are just talking about fragrances. I only talk about them here, really. Welcome to tier 6. This is where things are getting truly interesting, and we're starting tier 6 with 2010's Montel Oud Musk. This is an absolute beast mode fragrance. If you want a deeply powerful, animalic, leathery, musky, oud-based fragrance, look no further than Oud Musk. I've only worn this once because it's simply too strong. For a mortal man such as myself, it's too strong. Good God, that is strong. You can smell it. As soon as you take it out of the packaging, you can smell it. And it's such a well-presented fragrance as well. It looks beautiful. It smells very powerful. If you're after something that smells musky, leathery, and also like oud, then Montel's Oud Musk is going to be for you. You're going to meet a lot of people that do not like the way this one smells. You will occasionally meet somebody that may like it on you, but for the most part it's simply too strong, too powerful, too animalic for all but the most dedicated fragrance lovers out there. Personally, if I smelt this on a person and I identified it as Oud Musk, I'd be super impressed that somebody would leave the house wearing it because it is that strong. Even when you haven't sprayed it, it projects amazingly. That's how strong this one is. It is not going to be for everybody, but that's why it's down on tier 6. If you want to spend $200 on a fragrance that's going to make people think you smell disgusting, go ahead and wear this. I mean, I personally think it smells great, but I'm not everybody. And that is why it's at the tier 6. Next up, from 2018, we've got Mancera's Hindu Kush. This is a deeply smoky, resinous cannabis fragrance. Here it is there. There's a lot to this one that would make me want to put it lower on the list, but I know that smoky quality to it, it's just so strong, it's so powerful that people are going to just despise how strong this one is, how well it projects. It's simply too strong. This, more than anything else on tier 6, could probably have been bumped down to tier 5 maybe, but it's just so strong. As soon as you take that cap off, it is potent. It's in your face with that smoky, that sweet resinous. It's beautiful. I love the way it smells, but it's not going to be for everybody. I honestly think you'll get more compliments wearing Hindu Kush than you would wearing Oud Musk, for example, but I don't want to put it to the test right now. Feel free to make a video on that and then link it to me. I'd love to check it out if you want to do that. But yeah, it's simply too strong, too potent to wear out in public. People are going to hate the way it smells on you, but you will meet people that do love the way it smells. Maybe at a farmer's market or something, it'll out in the open, it's going to get better and more positive attention, but especially indoors, it's simply too strong. And it is too expensive at well over $200 Australian. Next up from 2021, we've got Rammstein's Cocaine Black Intense. This is a deeply leathery, smoky incense fragrance. Imagine the incense of Incense Avignon, for example, combined with a similar leatherish quality to Gucci Guilty Absolute. It is very animalic, very smoky, and it is the utmost extreme end of that smoky incense and leatherish vibe. It's a beautiful smelling fragrance. I've only ever smelled a sample of it, but it's not going to be for everybody. It's going to have a lot of people. There are going to be a lot of people out there that simply can't stand how strong it is. The projection for Black Intense is massive. It's a fantastic fragrance, a beautiful composition, but it's simply too strong to be worn out in public. It's also not a very common fragrance. I've never smelt it out in the wild before. It's very difficult to get here in Australia. But if you've tried it before, let me know in the comments below what would your use case be for that particular fragrance. Maybe a rave in a graveyard, rave in the grave. Is that a movie? That should be a movie. I think it might be a Return of the Dead movie. But if it isn't, maybe I should make it. And finally, from 2007, we've got Tom Ford's Japan Noir. This is a discontinued fragrance. It's very difficult to find nowadays, but I just thought Tuscan leather and ombre leather are too obvious of a pick for it. Bed of a Spice, Patchouli. It is a deeply dark, mysterious, and dense fragrance. If you like your patchoulis, your leathers, and your smokes, definitely try and find Japan Noir, but the pricing nowadays in particular, well over 500 bucks. You can still find samples of it quite regularly, especially on eBay, and you can get them for a good price. But I just know that this is the style of fragrance that people will shy away from. There is not a lot to it that's going to be mass appealing. That leather is simply too dense, the smoke is too strong, and the patchouli is too earthy and heady. Even though I love this fragrance, it's not going to get you a lot of positive attention. Not in a way that Tuscan leather or ombre leather are, at least. And it finishes tier 6 for today. Now we're moving into tier 7, the blackest depths. We are in such dark territory now. Things are going to get very interesting. We're now getting into the fragrances that I really wanted to talk about. It's almost as though you make a list like this to talk about the final 2 tiers. And I can't wait to talk about these. Starting off tier 7, we've got Zombie by Demeter. This is meant to smell like a zombie. It's been alleged that Demeter released this fragrance at the height of The Walking Dead's popularity. Zombies were mainstream, they were massive, and Demeter, being a library of fragrances, decided to create a fragrance that was much like a zombie. And what do they have here? They've got something that smells similar to Funeral Home, which is also by Demeter. It's damp, mossy, and a little floral as well. The fragrance itself isn't dark per se, but the fact that it's meant to represent a zombie, that it was meant to capitalize on the trend of zombies at the time. Zombies were everywhere, and I loved it. I personally can never get sick of zombies. Zombie is known for the mushroomy, earthy opening and a subtle smokiness right in the tail end of the scent. If you've ever smelt it before, let me know in the comments below. I've actually never smelt it personally, but I've read enough about it to know sort of where it's heading, and I love the concept, and I couldn't make a fragrance iceberg list and not include something like Zombie by Demeter. Next up, from 2022, we have Toscavat's Inexcusable Evil. This fragrance is well known for smelling like balsamic vinegar, alcohol, blood, iodine, and smoke. There is nothing in this fragrance that's going to appeal to a wider audience. You may occasionally go to a vampire club or something, and I reckon it'll go down a treat in that sort of location, in that sort of environment, but out in the public, out in the wild, in a nice little cafe or a coffee shop, it is not going to be beloved at all. I haven't smelt this one personally, but in doing my research for this video, I had to include this one on the list. The name Inexcusable Evil, what an incredible name for a fragrance, and the notes themselves, with notes like gunpowder, blood, iodine, concrete, and incense, you're gonna have a fragrance that is very dark, very dense, and it's not going to be appealing to a lot of people. It's going to appeal to a bloke like me that would happily wear a fragrance like that, but again, it's not going to appeal to everyone, and that is why it's in tier 7. Next up, from 2009, we've got Nasamoto's Black Afghano, and I'll just read you out what it says on the back. This bottle of perfume is part of the project Nasamoto. The fragrance aims to evoke the best quality of hashish. It is the result of a quest to arouse the effects of temporary bliss. Here is the fragrance. It's one of my personal favorites. It is very dark, deep, and dense. Smoky. It is so smoky that it almost veers towards a sweet direction. It's an extrait de parfum. It is incredibly strong. It is incredibly dense. One spray of this lasts me 48 hours. I wore this on Boxing Day once when I worked at a clothing store, and it simply would not leave my skin no matter how hard I tried. But in saying that, I didn't want it to leave. It's a very dark fragrance. You're not going to meet many people that like the way that this one smells. Black Afghano is the perfect example of a fragrance that you wear to appease your own senses. And like it says on the box, this gives you that temporary bliss. It is a beautiful smelling, smoky fragrance, resinous, deep, dark, alluring even. And of everything on tier 7, this is probably going to be the easiest to recommend if you're looking for somebody to perhaps like one of these darker style fragrances. It's also on a lot of people's radar as well. You may have smelt this one, but I doubt it. If you're after something dark, resinous and smoky, check this one out. It's very lavish and quite beautiful as well. It's a masterpiece. Next up, from 2019, we have Beaufort London's Terror and Magnificence. This smells like gunpowder and smoke. It is an incredibly dark, dense fragrance. Performance for this one is eternal. You spray this on your skin and it is going to stick to your skin like super glue. That is how strong this is. If you want to smell like gunpowder and smoke and blood, then definitely check out Terror and Magnificence. Beaufort London are well known for creating fragrances that leave a lasting impression, both on your senses and on your skin, because they won't leave your skin. One of the more popular fragrances in their collection is Fathom V. It's on the fresher side of things, but it's still a little niche, it's still esoteric. This, on the other hand though, Terror and Magnificence, it has everything you want in a deep, dark, mysterious fragrance. I hope that you actually try this one out on a sample, because it is such a beautiful composition, but there will be scant few that will appreciate the way it smells. Terror and Magnificence kind of reminds me of the show Taboo with Tom Hardy. If you could imagine the streets of London in like the 1800s at that time, this sort of reminds me of how that might have smelt like. It certainly creates an image in my head, and it evokes that sort of atmosphere, that dark, gritty atmosphere. And that brings us to the final fragrance on tier 7, 2012's Slumber House Norn. This fragrance was directly inspired by the music of black metal, the genre of music black metal. With notes of fir and incense, Norn is supposed to evoke the deep dark forests of Sweden and Norway and Denmark. It is meant to encapsulate the sound of black metal, very dissonant, atonal, harsh. It smells like a dark pine forest. It has a lot of beauty to it, but that beauty comes at a price. The fragrance itself will stain your skin. It's that dense with fragrance oil, and the performance is too strong. You only need a single spray of this. It functions more like a fragrance oil in how it sits on your skin, except that it projects like an actual fragrance. If you want something that smells both natural and as dark as it can possibly get, definitely check out Norn by Slumber House. It is supposed to be an absolute beast, and if you like the music of black metal, perhaps it should be on your radar anyway. What is up, my spooky mates of YouTube? My name is Ozzy Marcel, and we are back doing the last part of the fragrance iceberg, my fragrance iceberg. And I've got some great fragrances here for you today. Actually, that's not entirely true. Great is very subjective, and I don't know if great applies to any of these, but let's just say they're gonna get pretty interesting. So, starting things off. Pure ambergris. Now, not many people actually know this, but the ingredient of ambergris, and it is technically an ingredient rather than a fragrance, a refined fragrance itself, is whale vomit and bile from a whale's digestive tract. Typically, it washes up on the beach, or it can even be found floating in the sea. Either way, people actually go around beaches trying to find this stuff, and if you actually smell it in person, it has this almost fecal, sickly sweet type of smell. It's meant to be one of those scents that's both pleasant and completely unpleasant to smell at the same time. I mean, we are talking about bile here, so I think it's pretty obvious why it is on this tier of the fragrance iceberg. It's not something you're going to want to go and smell, and nowadays, with the rules and regulations being what they are, most fragrance houses and most fragrance companies are using ambroxan instead of pure ambergris. Although, if you do some quick Googling, you can still find some fragrances and some oils in particular that use real authentic ambergris oil. And supposedly ambergris oil itself, once it's been refined a little bit, it's a much more pleasant aroma, but pure ambergris itself, being bile, being vomit, and having a fecal quality, is why it has earned a spot on the tier 8 of the iceberg. Not the worst thing you can imagine, but certainly not the best, and knowing that it's a whale vomit, that's something else. Next up, we have pure deer musk from a musk deer. Pure deer musk is actually harvested from deers, so an animal must be killed in order to obtain the musk. It's from the caudal gland of the musk deer, and I've got some information here for you. Deer musk is of a dark purplish color, dry, smooth, and unctuous to the touch, and bitter in taste. Who is tasting deer musk? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, a grain of musk will distinctly scent millions of cubic feet of air without any appreciable loss of weight, and its scent is not only more penetrating, but also more persistent than that of any other known substance. In addition to its odoriferous principle, it contains ammonia, cholesterol, fatty matter, a bitter resinous substance, and other animal principles. And according to this, the highest quality is Tonkin musk from Vietnam, followed by Assam and Nepal musk. And then in the lower ranks, we've got Russian deer, Chinese deer. So obviously, considering that an animal must be killed in order to harvest this ingredient, and obviously you could throw other ingredients, similar ingredients here, like civet and castoreum, which are also from animals. But those ingredients are usually all synthetic now. Pure deer musk is very hard to obtain, and like ambergris, it is an animal substance. With that all being said, I think it's pretty clear why pure deer musk is in the last tier of the fragrance iceberg. If you want strength, pure strength when it comes to fragrances, look no further than deer musk, but just know where it comes from before you go inquiring further. Next up, we've got a really interesting one here. Vulva Original from 2004. Vulva Original is meant to smell like the female anatomy. And there was no nicer way to put that, so I hope I did a good enough job for you guys. There is a listing for Amazon for this particular product, and I will include a photo of it. And you sort of know the type of people buying this fragrance because the most linked items with it are sex dolls, which is just so charming to be looking at right now. So that says a lot about the product itself. Here are the highlights of Vulva Original. Exciting scent, smell of a vagina as a pure odor and lust enhancing agent. The better and longer lasting alternative for lovers of worn panties. More intense masturbation due to the desire to smell on a vagina. Who wrote this? Smell at the most intimate part of a woman and bring your own head cinema to new dimensions. Head cinema. Head cinema. I've never heard that term before. Simple, discreet handling. Apply on the back of the hand, smell, and enjoy Vulva Original with an erotic film or perfect in combination with a masturbator. A fragrance pheromone mix as a loss-enhancing aphrodisiac consists of genuine intense scent of a vagina, intimate body odor, fragile perfume note, real organic substances. Quality product made in Germany. Laboratory tested for safe use. Hygiene protection seal. You just know it's the Germans coming up with something like that. You just know it. And the customer reviews, so we've got 236 global ratings, and it's got a 3.2 out of 5 rating. And these are all in German. I'm going to translate this particular one from a bloke named Philip. I'll read it out for you. And he's given this 4 out of 5 stars. A special fragrance experience, unfortunately too high a price. Now I will give you the price. It actually isn't available right now, so I can't give you an exact price, but maybe it'll say in the review. And this was done on 16th of September 2023. This is really a very special product. The scent it offers is simply amazing. When I first applied it, I was surprised and a bit disappointed at first because it smelled different than expected. But over time, the scent developed and became relatively realistic. The impressive thing is that this small bottle lasts an astonishingly long time, despite its small size. That's what she said. You only need a tiny amount to get a pleasant scent. Unfortunately, I have to say that the price for this product is much too high. Although the quality of the scent is impressive, I think it could be better value for money. Overall, I am divided on this product. The scent is great and also relatively long lasting, but the high price reduces the overall experience. If you're willing to spend a bit more to get a special scent experience, then this product might still be for you. Is there any English? These are literally all reviews in German, so like I said before, I stand by what I said, those damn Germans. And I will also add that the language of German translates really well to English, just because English is a Germanic language. Anyway, I think it's pretty clear, pretty obvious why this scent from 2004 is on the list. I'm not going to say anything more about it. Let's move on. Next up, from 2014, we have Eau de Death Corpse Cologne, and this one is very interesting. I can't wait to read about this one to you guys. This was the one I was looking forward to most, because I remember reading about this years ago. Eau de Death, the perfect perfume. Rachel Burks is depending on for her recipe for Eau de Death, the only cologne you'll need to disguise yourself when the dead rise. Now, this was during a period of my life when I was obsessed. Well, what can I say, actually? I am still obsessed with zombie stuff, but I was really obsessed with it. You know, this was at the height of The Walking Dead. You know, the Walking Dead comic was still fantastic, and Robert Kirkman didn't absolutely throw it all away. Anyways, I digress. Burks, a postdoctoral researcher at Doane College in Nebraska, says that the key to this zombie camouflage is two perfectly named chemical compounds which the body produces pretty quickly in decomposition: putrescine and cadaverine. For those wondering why these words sound familiar, both have their roots in the Latin that became putrid and cadaver. Putrid comes from the Latin putridus, meaning rotten or decayed, while cadaver comes from the Latin cado, which translates as I fall, and was used as a metaphor for dying. But back to the chemistry. Burke says that both these chemicals are incredibly stinky at low quantities and are active in parts per billion. This is actually pretty useful, as it means that come the zombie apocalypse, scientists won't have to make a whole lot to save people. In a video from the American Chemical Society, Burke notes that producing this ungodly stink would be actually pretty easy. A modified version of the E. coli bacteria could act as a little factory for the chemicals, producing the putrescine and cadaverine, as well as a little bit of methanol for that rotten egg boiled cabbage smell, all in a single pot. So I think it's pretty clear why we're including Eau de Death on the list. The smell of death, the smell of rot and decay, putrescence, decomposition. Nobody wants to be smelling that. Even the darkest of goths, even the most gothic of people, I think would not want to smell like this. Although if that is you and you do want to smell like this, let me know in the comments below. I'd actually be genuinely curious to know who would wear this fragrance in particular. It is definitely an interesting choice for a fragrance. The smell of death, although interesting, is obviously going to be as dark as it gets. And that is why this is on the last tier of the fragrance Iceberg. Next up, we have Surplus by Jamie Nicholas from 2011. According to the Fragrantica article, Surplus by Jamie Nicholas is a fragrance for women and men, and it was launched in 2011. This new fragrance by the London-based artists Jamie Nicholas smells of feces and dirt. So in other words, it smells like shit and dirt. The fragrance is named Surplus, perfectly suited to this controversial concept. I didn't want to be like all the other schmucks and translate something from English into French just to sound glamorous, says Jamie. Surplus carries the same meaning in both languages, which negates the romantic connotations of the French language. He was inspired by a book by the French writer Dominique Leporte called The History of Shit, which analyzes the theoretical and social implications of feces and its role as a building material for cosmetics. It suggested that pleasant smells were used to cover bad smells, so it could be suggested that a bad smell could be used to cover pleasant smells. Again, I think this one's very obvious why we're including it in the last tier of the fragrance iceberg. The ingredients listed, really, it makes sense with what the creators of the fragrance were saying. Dirt being a building block, dirt, mud, clay, soil, these were all building blocks when it comes to pre-agricultural societies. And shit also, well, in this case it would be manure, and manure being a binding agent when it comes to construction of pre-agricultural society houses as well. Who would wear Surplus by Jamie Nicholas? I'm not sure. I certainly wouldn't wear it, and I would wear some pretty dark fragrances. I just want to check out some reviews for it. Are there any positive reviews here? This one's by V Marshmallow. I would like very badly to smell this scent. Wait, don't I already do that daily when my husband leaves the bathroom? I guess I could throw a few handfuls of dirt in the bathroom for the full effect. A user here by the name of Scentzilla claims to have actually smelt this particular, and it says it's not scatological at all. But he doesn't have any details here about the smell of the fragrances except the inclusion of white floral notes. So, I don't know, maybe they've smelt it, maybe they haven't. Either way, I'm not too curious about smelling this one, but considering the subject matter, it is perfect for the final tier of the iceberg. And we've reached the very last fragrance on my definitive fragrance iceberg. From Etat Libre d'Orange, we've got Secretions Magnifiques from 2006. And I will read you out the creator's perfume description here. Like blood, sweat, sperm, saliva, Secretions Magnifiques is as real as an olfactory coitus that sends one into raptures. To the pinnacle of sensual pleasure, that extraordinary and unique moment when desire triumphs over reason. Masculine tenseness frees a rush of adrenaline in a cascade of high-pitched aldehydic notes. The sensation of freshness is gripping, then the fragrance reveals a metallic note. Precise and as sharp as an unappeased desire. We are on razor edge. Skin and sweat mingle and tastes of musk and sandalwood. The slightly salt marine effect stirs, arouses, and sets your mouth watering. Tongues and sexes find one another. Pleasure explodes and all goes wild. Confusion reigns supreme. A subversive, disturbing perfume. It's love or hate at first sight. Sensuous jousting is rarely satisfied with half measures. In between Don Juan and the woman who offers herself, arms are laid down. Who will be the first to surrender? Composition. Blood eyes accord, Funcus orezine, adrenaline accord, blood accord, milk accord, iris, coconut, sandalwood, Opanac. Okay, and then this is quite funny. We've got the AI generated pros and cons here. So the pros are perfect fragrance for necromancers and or roadkill fine dining events. Deliciously offensive, a work of art. Cons, not wearable for most occasions. Causes nausea and vomiting, reminiscent of bodily fluids and secretions. And the reviews on the fragrance itself are pretty mixed. It's an even split between I love it and I hate it, and that makes sense considering this fragrance is meant to be the embodiment of bodily fluids. I would actually consider trying this fragrance and wearing it. The metallic note and the blood notes are meant to be the strongest notes here. The note of blood always in fragrances comes across as quite metallic and like iodine a little bit. That's my experience at least. I've never smelt this fragrance in particular, but the brand itself is well known for creating works of art, and I'm honestly looking forward to trying this one out. But it's pretty obvious again why this one is on the list. This one is meant to smell like sex and bodily fluids. I'm not going to comment which ones in particular. And with that, we have finished the fragrance iceberg. I had a lot of fun making this one, guys. It's been my favorite video series I've done here on the channel. If you want to see more long form content like this, let me know in the comments below. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. And again, it's been a pleasure making this one for you guys. Until the next video, my name is Ozzy Marcel, and I'll catch you guys around.